Genesis. Genesis chapter 1 this morning. So all this month, the month of August, we have been preaching on the family. So family by design. And I was asked to speak at a family camp at the end of this month, and as I began studying for those messages, the Lord laid upon my heart to preach them here as well. And I love families. I love preaching on the family, but I'll be real honest with you. This is one of the toughest series I've ever had to preach. And I'm convinced of it for this reason, that the devil has been attacking our families. Okay? Our families, by sin, have been broken. The devil's after us. And so these messages are hitting between the eyes sometimes for each and every one of us. First week was different by design. The next week was marriage by design. And what we're doing is we are elevating God's design. Here's the ideal. Here's what family could be if we would follow His design. And just like everything that God has put into the universe, that where He said it is good, it is very good, we find that because of sin we fall short, don't we? And today I'm going to be preaching on parenting by design. And all the singles and kids went, oh, right? But and this is difficult for me as well, because a pastor, they say, lives in a glass house. And I have little kids. And so you can see me week to week as a parent. And you know, he's no expert at this stuff. I get it. I understand, okay? But I'm preaching the ideal today. I'm preaching, here's the design. Here's how it is supposed to work. And so with that, if you would pray for me as I preach, and you just do a good job. Nod once in a while, blink once in a while would be helpful, okay? All those things are good. Okay, Genesis chapter 1, now that I've got you good and scared. Genesis 1:27, it says, "So God created man in His own image. In the image of God created He him. Male and female created He them. And God blessed them. And God said unto them," so here's His first command to the new mankind, husband and wife, "Be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth and subdue it and have dominion over the fish of the sea and over the fowl of the air and over every living thing that moveth upon the earth." Look at chapter 4. Here they begin obeying God's command. Chapter 4, verse 1, "And Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bare Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord." Now I want you to go to Psalm 127. So we're springboarding off of Genesis, and we're going to be focusing in here on Psalm 127. Verse 1 says, "Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain. It is vain for you to rise up early, to sit up late, to eat the bread of sorrows, for so He giveth His beloved sleep." Now pay attention here. "Lo, children are an heritage of the Lord, and the fruit of the womb is His reward. As arrows are in the hand of a mighty man, so are children of the youth. Happy is the man that hath his quiver full of them. They shall not be ashamed, but they shall speak with the enemies in the gates." Parenting by design. Let's pray. Father, thank You for Your word. Help us now as we endeavor to teach it and preach it and get some practical help for our lives and our families. Guard our families, Lord. Guard this church this morning. In Christ's name, amen. In high school, my first real job outside of the house, all right, where I was making more than like a quarter an hour for my dad. I worked for a company that built pickup truck bed covers, and Brother Josh Garcia still works for that. They were based here in Bemidji for a time. Now they're over in Wisconsin. But at the time, we would machine the aluminum, we would assemble the panels, we'd box them up, ship them all over the country. And so my main coworker there, Matthew, he was oftentimes, while I was machining and putting things together, he was often occupied in the other room on the phone talking with some customer, across the country who had no idea how to put their truck bed cover over, because it looks very straightforward. You pull it out, you pick it up out of the box, And it's like, oh, I see how this works. I get it. I see the rails and stuff. And so being good typical men, they just grab it and they go. And the little pieces of paper down the bottom, just toss those out. And then they get halfway into the project and it's backwards, or they've got half a dozen pieces. They have no idea where these go and it's not operating right. So they call up all angry. And the first question is, well, did you receive an instruction manual? Okay. None of you men are stubborn like that, right? When you get a new product, you spend the first hour poring over the instructions, making sure you got it all. No, right. And so a lot of times the problem is that they never paid attention to the instructions by the one who made the product. Now, have you ever thought this as a parent? I sure wish those kids would have come with some kind of instruction manual. You bring these kids home and they tell you a little bit of what to expect, and then it's like chaos after that. All right? They did come with an instruction manual. From the manufacturer who designed them, he gave us some instructions on how to parent our children. Because eventually all of your best intentions and all of your theories are thrown in the trash, and you realize, I don't have a clue what I'm doing with all this. And I hope to give you some encouragement today. Some of it will sting, but some of it can give you some tools and some help for how to raise your kids. And like I said before, it's not because I'm such an expert. It's because the Lord blessed me with some wonderful children, some wonderful, strong-willed children that have put me through the ringer and have caused me to go to the book and have caused me to go to books. These are just a few that have been on my shelf that I've studied and learned from and brought mentors into my life and helped me, and I hope to pass on some of that to you. Psalm 127 says that children are as arrows in the hand of a mighty man. I enjoy shooting bow and arrow. I love it. I like shooting it at targets. I like shooting it at deer. It's wonderful. And when I was learning how to shoot, my dad was teaching me, and there's basically three things that have to line up every time. The target, the sight, and your eye. Okay, those have to be in line for the arrow to fly where it's supposed to be. Now, to get them in line and to be consistent in your shooting, it's also good to have a few anchor points. Anchor points are like there's maybe a peephole on the line, and you can look through that, and that makes sure you're at the right angle looking at the sight. Another one my dad taught me, a little trick, was to bring the string all the way back and touch it on my nose. That way I know I'm drawn back the exact same length every time, the right angle. Bring my knuckle right underneath my ear, and every time I am anchored in all those points. Those anchor points help me to shoot the arrows consistently. All right, so the idea here is that I want to give you some anchor points on how to be consistent in shooting our arrows. Now, the arrows that we shoot as hunters, maybe coming from Gander Mountain or Cabela's or something like that, and they've got like these graphite shafts and they're almost flawless. Well, not so back then. When a mighty man would go out to hunt or go into battle, he probably made those arrows himself. And each one would have little dings and maybe a little bend or a curve to it, and this one has a feather that's messed up. And he gets to know his arrows, that I know this one shoots a little left. Okay, I know this one tends to be high. And so you can compensate and you can help fire those arrows where they're supposed to be by understanding the unique bend of each one. Well, every child has a unique bend to them. Okay? Each one has a unique personality, and some of them tend to go this way, and some of them tend to go that way, And you just have to get to know the arrows, and they're not going to hit the target on their own. They won't do it. Children don't raise themselves. They need a parent. They need especially a father who will aim them properly. And it takes parents that will be purposeful in how they raise their children. So, how do we get kids to the target? What is the target? I believe the target is to get them saved and loving and serving God. Okay? That then when they leave the house, that they are obedient disciples of Jesus Christ. Serving Him, loving Him, that's the target. That's the bullseye. That's what we're aiming for. So how do we do it? How do we anchor ourselves? How do we find these anchor points to help us shoot them straight? Now, so I'm going to give you a couple of points. They are these, three things: teaching, training, correcting. Very simple. Teaching, training, correcting. They don't necessarily have to happen in that order, okay? It's not like this phase of life is teaching, this phase is training, this phase is correcting, all right? It's all the time. It's juggling these three, trying to find the right balance, and they're going to look different. They'll be different the way we implement them depending on what age the children are. But you're not going to teach a 3-year-old on the same level as a 13-year-old. Your tactics of correction are going to change. So, with that, I've got a lot of material. You ready? Blink. Blink. Okay, good. All right, let's dive in. Number 1, teach your children. Turn with me to Deuteronomy chapter 6. Deuteronomy 6. Teach your children. The only way to guide your children to grow into people who have a genuine love for the Lord is to show them how to love the Lord. This is the best teaching. It is to model for them. Deuteronomy 6, verse 4, it says, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one Lord, and thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thine heart, and with all thy soul, and with all thy might. And these words which I command thee this day shall be in thine heart, and thou shalt teach them diligently unto thy children, and shalt talk of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, and when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt bind them for a sign upon thine hand, and they shall be as frontlets between thine eyes, and thou shalt write them upon the posts of thy house and on thy gates." So the idea is, in everyday life, as you're just going about life with your children, be bringing the Word of God and teaching it and pouring it into their lives. When they get up in the morning, remind them about God. Remind them about the Word of God. When they go to bed at night, when you're walking through the day, all the time, put it on the posts of your house. Put it everywhere that you are putting into them, teaching them what God wants for their lives. But it's good teaching of how to love God starts with you loving God. That's why he says in verse 5, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God." These things should be in thy heart, and then you can teach them. It's unfortunate to me how all education has been delegated out to quote-unquote expert educators, okay? Now it is from preschool through college and beyond. Any facet of education that a child is to go through is being done by expert educators. Even when it comes to spiritual things, who are the expert educators? Well, we're going to bring them to church, right? And the pastor's an expert, and the youth director is an expert, and so we will allow them to educate our children. Listen, that's fine. We're here to help. That's not God's original design, okay? God's design is for the primary educators of their children, the children, to be their own parents. That doesn't mean don't send them to school. It doesn't mean don't send them to Sunday school. It just means that you ought to make these decisions on purpose and recognize that others can assist, but no one can replace mom and dad in the education of their children. You have to have these things in your heart and be teaching them, not just biblical truth, but all facets of life. You're going to be teaching them life skills and making sure that they're learning their alphabet and reading and writing and math and history and all that stuff. And some life lessons you teach in other ways. I remember many times my dad trying to get me out of my room and saying, "Come on, son, we're going to go hunting." And I didn't really want to go hunting. I was an indoorsy kind of kid. And he said, "Let's go." and he taught me lessons about endurance and being outside and life lessons. Sometimes those lessons come through sports. Like, okay, you're going to be in soccer this year. You're going to be in baseball this year. We're going to try football. Now, sports are fine, but they are not the end game. They are a means to the end. They're important as long as you are teaching them life lessons through it. But how often does that teaching tool become the all-encompassing thing, that our lives become consumed with? And it's like, no, when it's teaching a life lesson, it's a good thing. When it takes priority over everything, it's out of balance, right? So teach your children. Teaching, and so that's whether they go on to pursue a college degree or a calling from God, or they step right into the workplace. Our job, parents, is to make sure that they are prepared to make their own decisions before God as adults by the time they leave home. And doesn't it seem like childhood just keeps getting extended further and further and further and further out into life, you know? It ought to be when they leave home that they are loving God, serving God, basically capable, independent adults. Okay? That's the goal. That's the target. So teach your kids. Number 2, second anchor point here, this is a big one, train your children. Train them. Book of Proverbs, chapter 22. Proverbs chapter 22 and verse 6. It says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. Train up a child in the way he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart from it. So the Hebrew word there for train up, it means to narrow their way. So instead of just shooting wherever, we are bringing it to a narrow range. Okay, we're purposefully getting them to go a certain direction. So what's the difference between teaching and training? Teaching is communicating information to them, showing, modeling, giving them knowledge. Training is more forcibly narrowing them to that way which is right. Because just saying to the kid, okay, here's the target, go here, does not mean that they're going to go right for that target. Amen. In fact, they have a sinful bent to them, a fleshly bent that we all have, that wants to go pretty much anywhere but that target. Okay? And so our job as parents is to narrow their way and try to get it to where that they will go towards God's design for their life. Teaching is done by showing and speaking. Training is more hands-on. So when your little one, let's give some examples here. When your little one wants to play with the electrical socket, okay? They've got a little thing and they're poking into it because, hey, this little hole's here. It must be for my enjoyment and entertainment, right? And they're playing with it. Well, that's very dangerous, obviously, for a kid to be messing with that. And so you can go over there and you can say, no, this will hurt you. Okay? Now, they might understand you at that point. They might be too young to understand what you're trying to teach them. And so it is your obligation then to train them to stay away from it. Okay? And so when they reach for it to go in there, here's my training tool. A light swat. Okay? No. You say no. A light swat. And that just registers a little sting of pain with the word no, and that's bad, okay? And you say, I couldn't ever hurt my little one. Well, there will be pain, one way or the other. You will decide what degree of pain they experience. Will it be a life-threatening zap out of the electrical socket, or will it be a little no? Okay? And you do that several times, and eventually they get the idea. All right? It seems like mankind, aren't you amazed if you ever go to like the circus or you see these animals and there's these trained elephants and lions and have you ever seen a singing eye dog and just how focused that they are and how obedient that they are? And like, this is a dog, you know? And we seem as mankind to be able to train animals far more effectively than we can train little people. Which do you think is more intelligent, a dog or a human child? The human child has far more capacity to understand and to wire their brain in the way that they should go. So you think about a dog that can be trained to come when you tell it to. Can be trained that means come. Or they can be trained to sit and stay and be quiet, to heel by your side without any leash. And they don't run off. That is possible. Not every dog's like that. You understand me, okay? But it can be done. The right kind of training techniques, it can be done. It can be trained to wait for your command before they run off. Why do we so struggle then with our children? Okay? So training. You know how the dog trainers get it done? A little sting of pain. And reward. Reward and pain. And my brother he's had a dog for a while. He just bought a training collar, okay? Because his dog has not been obeying. And he needs the dog to be trained to obey. Now, we're not talking yet about spanking or correcting. This is not discipline. This is just training them, teaching them what they can and cannot do. Okay, I'll give you another example. In Florida, the platform was off limits to whoever didn't need to be up there. Okay, kids, stuff like that. We had a big platform. We didn't want the kids running back and forth across the church platform. And it was so tempting, though, because there's like 7, 8 steps, and it's just like, it's a magnet, kid magnet. And so when they were young and they'd start crawling up those steps, we would come over and we would have to take some time. And when they would start on that first step, you give them a little swat, not a spanking, just a swat to get their attention and say no. And sometimes they would respond to that, in 2 or 3 tries. Sometimes 50, okay? And it just took just investing that time. And pretty soon, you know what? After a few services where this would go on, we never had to tell our kids again. They just understood. They just knew it had registered in their brain. We're not allowed on the platform. We didn't have to keep enforcing it. We didn't have to keep yelling at them. They can just be trained. I remember that our dog my dad had trained the dog. It was an indoor dog, and he had trained him not to come in the kitchen. Of course, when you're eating, that's where the dog wants to be, right? Wants to be in the kitchen. And he knew that at that edge where the carpet met the linoleum, he could go no further. How did you train him to do that? How do you think? Little stings of pain, okay? Linoleum equals pain. Don't go on the linoleum. And he knew it. And eventually it wasn't a fight anymore. He just knew where he was supposed to go and where he wasn't supposed to go. Kids can be trained all kinds of ways. Cameron had this habit of pushing the buttons on the TV. He'd come up, and as soon as he was walking, he'd go up, push the button on the TV. And it was the most annoying thing. We're trying to watch TV. Boop, and everything would turn off. And so we could have, scooted a big table in front of it or put tape all over the buttons and stuff. But you know what we started to do? When he would reach for it and he would touch it, no. And pretty soon, guess what Cameron wasn't touching anymore? The TV. Okay? We also did it with the remote because he loves buttons, apparently. And one way would be to put the remote up where you can't reach it. But you derail your kids' training when you do that because it teaches them, it's enforcing to them, the only thing that you cannot have is that which you cannot reach. Okay? We're talking about training them discipline in their hearts. We're training them for life. And so instead, we would leave the remote right where he could reach it. But over time, he never touched that remote. Okay? He learned through training. That is off limits. I don't get to touch it. It's breaking those habits, not through discipline, not through spanking, but through the light stinging of training. And you can give rewards as well, and you can reinforce this with positive things. And when you do everything you can to child-proof your home, that's the wrong attitude. Home-proof your child instead. Okay? Because that way, when you go to somebody else's house, they're not all destructive and stuff and you're having to chase after them and put everything up. No, we went down to Florida last February. Everybody still good this morning? Still love me? Okay. Last February, went to Florida, and a lady graciously offered the use of her home while we were there for that church meeting. And we walked in the door. She was not there at the time. She just handed us the key, trusted us with it. Wonderful lady. We walked in the door, and as soon as we opened the door, my wife and I looked at each other and we're like, okay, because this was a single lady and everything looked breakable. Okay, she had this table and it was just glass, and on top of the glass table were hundreds of seashells and sand dollars and all this stuff she had collected at the beach, and everything was delicate and breakable and stuff on the walls, and we were like, okay, this is gonna be interesting. And so we spent the first hour or more going around teaching the kids, here's the zones where you can go, don't touch anything up here. And with Maddie, it took a couple of those all right? But I'm telling you, we never moved a single seashell the whole time we were there. And they never touched one, okay? That's what I'm talking about, that you can enjoy your kids and you can give them boundaries where they are not destructive, where you don't have to continually police them if you'll take the upfront investment of training them. And I'm not saying that this is easy. I'm not saying that it's fun. It's not quick either. It takes a lot of time. And some kids, all kids will push you and test your limits. And if you put up a wall, they will push on that wall and see if it will hold, okay? Every single time. But some kids are more inclined to push than others, okay? Raylyn, right? And without naming any names. And some will, you say no, they've learned, oh boy, I'm not going to do it. Just one rebuke or one word or one look with the eye, and they know. Others, it requires a whole new battle every time, to redo this thing. And yet, consistency in the long run will pay off. So, keep in mind this. When you are not purposefully training them, you are still training them. You are. You are showing them. The problem is you're not narrowing their path. You're leaving it broad. They can do whatever they want to do. They can always get their own way. Training them is forcing them into the way that you choose for them. In fact, it's very neglectful, very dangerous to not train your kids. If a child gets away from your grasp in a parking lot and runs out into the middle of the cars, you're going to wish that you had taken some time to teach them, come here, at a command. And you don't have to chase, you don't have to run, you don't have to panic. You say, come here. And they can. You can train them to come back to you. And that's a life-saving type of thing. It's very, very important to take some time to train. Training happens when kids get older too, but stop swatting the hand, okay? that kind of goes away. They're more verbal. It takes the form of reminders, okay? We're always reminding our kids, say please, okay? Clear your plate before you go. Don't just leave the table, all right? We're teaching them table manners. Say, may I please be excused? Things like that. We're reminding them of manners. And when they do right, you praise, you reward. When they neglect to do what you've taught them, you remind and rebuke. Now, in a perfect world, that should be all that is required, okay? That you could teach them the right way and you could purposefully train them to go the right way, and then they would go the right way. But we don't live in a perfect world, do we? We don't have perfect hearts. And so you can teach, you can train, you can be as consistent as you want. That still doesn't mean they will. Because sin has made every last one of us a rebel against the right way, against God's way. And as much as we may be shown and taught and trained the right way, every one of us has a deep down desire to go our own way. Okay, Isaiah chapter 53 verse 6 says, all we, not just the kids, all we like sheep have gone astray. We have gone every one his own way, and the Lord hath laid on him, Jesus Christ, the iniquity of us all. And so what do we do when against all hopes and all efforts to teach and to train this kid the right way, they're still going their own way? What do we do? Okay, correct. Correct your child. That's the Bible word. Are you in Proverbs 22:15, or did you try to catch me in Isaiah? Proverbs 22, verse 15. Okay, so verse 6 was train up a child. Verse 15 gives the next level. It says, foolishness is bound in the heart of a child, but the rod of correction shall drive it far from him. You get that? Kids are not by nature good, innocent people, okay? They may be innocent at the beginning before they understand right and wrong, but the sin is there. You don't have to teach them how to lie. You don't have to teach them how to disobey. The foolishness is bound. It is in there. But the rod of correction will drive it far from him. So, that rebellious, foolish desire to go our own way is not a product of environment. The sinful bent to do our own thing comes from within. We tend to look at these things as, oh, they're going through a phase. It's the terrible twos or whatever, and we're just like, oh man, I can't wait till they outgrow this one. They won't outgrow it. They won't. Rebellion does not just go away on its own. It changes form as they get older, but it only grows larger. Only grows into a larger problem. If allowed to go unchecked, that foolishness will lead to a life of heartache and pain and leave in its wake nothing but destruction. And so for the child's good, it must be driven out of them. But there is only one thing, one tool that God has given to curb and correct that rebellion, and the Bible calls it the rod of correction. Now this would go over well on national stage, wouldn't it? Yeah, I'd be lynched probably. But we're talking about physical correction. We call it spanking, okay? Corporal punishment, the legal world calls it. And speaking of legality, spanking is legal in all 50 states, okay? As long as it is reasonable, a reasonable amount of force does not cause lasting harm to the child. This is very legal. Don't be afraid, like, oh, it's against the law for me to spank my child. No, it's not. It's been challenged in court again and again and again. And even though public sentiment has turned against it largely, it is still legal and it is still Bible, more importantly. It's tough to talk about this, though. And here's why. Because mostly it's done wrong. And mostly we've never been taught how to do it right. Where do we learn how to spank our kids? We learn from our parents, right? And they learn it from their parents. And they learn it from their parents who didn't do it right. Okay? Dad had a temper, or Grandpa had a bad temper, and he wouldn't spank. He was real easygoing until it got about to here, and then there's steam coming out his ears, and boy, he would just start a wailing. And that is our concept of spanking. And so we tend to follow in our parents' footsteps, and that's not right. And if we don't follow in their steps, you know what we do? We swing to the other extreme. We say, I'm never doing that. I'm never going to touch my child because I know how dad or granddad did it, and I don't want to be that. Okay? And then we look to the world for any kind of instruction, and it's always just, no. You can't touch your kid. Don't do that. Just nurture, just foster. You know what you're nurturing? Foolishness, rebellion. You can't just nurture a child out of rebellion. It doesn't work that way. And so we're not coached on this. And so, Pastor, why are you preaching on this? This is weird. Come to church and hear about spanking because nobody else is teaching on it. If you don't get the answers here, where are you going to get them? This is how I got these answers. This is how, and we have to learn these things. And this is just practical stuff for the family. And so both the options, too hard a hand, too lenient a hand, are just disastrous for our kids. And so here's some coaching, if you will, some advice. This is rooted in Bible principle, but I'll tell you up front, I always like to be clear when I'm preaching. Here's verse, here's chapter, here's verse, here's Bible, and when I'm giving you a little bit of opinion, this is a little bit of opinion sprinkled in, okay? So I'll be clear on that. Your balance is going to be different from my balance. But here's some good points to remember with proper discipline spanking. Have a good reason to spank them. Not everything requires physical correction. You know what? Kids are silly. You kids silly? Yeah? Every one of you. They're all smiling like, yeah, I'm silly. All right? Silliness does not require correction. It may require some training, okay? It may require some teaching. No, we're at church. Sit still. Don't be silly, all right? Stuff like that. Don't get so, I'm so angry, it's so loud in here, and start spanking. No, they're just being silly. They're being children, okay? Kids are forgetful, aren't you kids? You forget things. You have selective hearing sometimes. Okay? Kids are clumsy. They will spill milk. All right? They will break dishes. Stuff like that. Those are accidents. So here are some of the offenses in the Hoiseth home that will automatically get you a spanking every time. Number one, defiance. If I see a defiant spirit, I want you to go to your bed. This was last night. Go to bed, Madeline. No. That's defiance. Not just disobedience. It's foolishness. It's rebellion wrapped up in the heart. And so the level at which I spank her may be less than an older child that can endure more. But there was a time of correction there. And I said, go to bed, Madeline. No. We did it again. Okay? And I didn't, here's what I did not do. I did not scoop her up, put her in bed and say, now stay. No, that's not obeying. That's like taking a dog, saying, sit, 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 sit. And then you push his rump down and say, okay, good boy. That's not obedience, okay? She needed to take action to obey, and so she was defiant in her attitude. And sometimes that's all it is a look. You tell them to do something, and it's just a look, like, what are you going to do about it? They have drawn the battle lines, okay? That defiant attitude is part of the foolishness. Also, disobedience. That's tied in a little bit, but sometimes it's not just this clear, immediate command. Sometimes it's a rule that we have implemented in our home, okay? No hitting your brother or sister. And what do? It's not that they forgot. It's not that they were silly. They broke the rule that they knew existed. That disobedience requires physical correction. Here's another one in our home. Temper. A temper tantrum. You can call it a tantrum, you can call it a meltdown, you can call it a fit. You know what it looks like. You've been to Walmart, right? when a kid just has a fit and they lose all self-control and just explode into rage. Listen, that's unacceptable. It's unacceptable. Do you want them to carry that into adulthood? Many do. Many do. Okay? No, it is natural for a child to feel anger. Okay? You don't discipline a child for an emotion that they feel. But you teach them through correction. There is a proper way to express that emotion, and this is not proper. So we don't give them warnings. I don't pull out a puppet and try to humor them and make them laugh and stop the fit, you know. And I certainly don't say, just be good. Here, I'll give it to you. No, you don't give in when they are throwing a fit. That's the worst thing that you can do, because it shows them, this is how I get what I want. Through anger. I can manipulate mom and dad if I just make them embarrassed enough. If I just throw enough of a fit, I will get what I want. You don't help your kids when they win. And so when they draw that line, when they descend into that fit, whatever it may look like, they don't get a warning. They have crossed a line, and they will be corrected. We've probably spent more time on that than anything else, because good training will teach them obedience and all of that. But this anger, this rage, it just seethes within every child, and you can't just pacify that. You must win. Okay, so those are some things in our home. Obviously, there are others. You need to draw some lines in your home and say, okay, when you cross this line, that's it. All right, you've made that choice, buddy. And don't say, okay, if you don't settle down in 1, 2, 2.5, because we don't want to spank. If you're a loving parent, you don't want to correct your children. And so you draw it out and say, well, okay, I'm going to count to 5 this time. You start all over again. And no, they're winning. They're winning that battle. You must win. Another big point, though, be in control of yourself. Don't spank your children in anger. You say, well, they make me angry. Okay, well, send them to their room, let them stew on it a little about what is coming, and you take that time and you cool off. And you go pray, you go count to 10, whatever you got to do to be in control of yourself. All right? Because you can't correct them if you're not correct. That makes sense, doesn't it? Have a set place of correction, somewhere private. Okay? We're not out to embarrass or humiliate the kids. It ought to be something done as much as possible in private, in their bedroom, in your bedroom, something like that. What about in public? Because kids learn very quickly, I can get away with things in public that I can never get away with at home, right? And part of that's training, because we tend to let our kids get away with more in the confines of home than when we are in public, when everybody's watching, or in these controlled situations. So manufacture those controlled situations at home. If they struggle to sit, hey, make a church time at home and cause them to sit. We're going to read. You don't get up. You don't run around. You don't talk. It's just training time at home. Purposeful. But it's okay to pull an audible when you're out in public and have to deal with the situation immediately, okay? My older kids, I can just look at them and say, okay, that's 1. And they know what that means, that when we get home, that's 1 spanking. And they can add up if you're out for a while, okay? And they know when they get home that 1 means something, and it can cause them to shape up right away. Sometimes that doesn't work so well, and you have to deal with it. At our home church, they had a furnace room closet, and that's where parents would have to take their kids in there at church sometimes and deal with them right there on the spot, because especially the younger ones, you wait several hours, they have no clue what you're spanking them for, okay? You got to deal with it at the moment. When we were on deputation, it was such chaos for our family. There was no routine. We were eating out at restaurants, which are a nightmare, right, parents? It's a nightmare to take your kids sometimes to a restaurant. And then we're eating there with other pastors, and these pastors that are considering taking us on for support, you know? And so there's all of these things mixed in, and our kids were not perfect at all, okay? I had one pastor coaching me on how to discipline my child, okay? And we're trying to get support from this guy. And I'm telling you, that I've walked through all of this stuff. And so our van became the spot, okay? When we're in a restaurant, do we need to go out to the van? Okay, let's go. They knew what that meant, all right? Because it's a private spot. You go into the restroom and sure as shooting, somebody's going to be in there, you know, and you're not going to have any privacy. All right, another point. I'm trying to work through these quickly. Only apply correction to the seed of the problem, okay? Only discipline them on the bottom. Don't strike a child in their face. Don't whip them across the back or on the legs or anything like that. No, God kind of designed a human child with a certain spot for correction to be applied. That's just how it works. Also, let me add this bit of perhaps opinion. Use a proper instrument of correction. Okay? When a child is young, the hand tends to be pretty effective, and you got a lot of control with the hand. But as they get older, that loses its effectiveness. And the more you have to apply force, the more you can cause harm. You can misalign their back, you can cause bruising, stuff like that. The Bible calls it a rod. I don't want you to think about iron rebar, you know. No. All right, it's talking about a twig. She's got these wide eyes over here. That's great. I'm talking about, it literally means a twig, a switch, okay? Many of you, when you're kids, probably it was like a paddle of some sort. In my home, it was the belt, right? The belt. I was amazed how quick my dad could get his belt off and fold it in his hand and going all at once. You know, it was like one motion. And so the belt might work. I've seen a lot of things. There are some things that don't work, okay? I've heard of people using like clothes hangers and just stuff that can cause more damage, you know? We're not after hurting the kids. We're seeking to inflict minor, temporary, fleeting pain, okay? And it's not designed to leave marks. Sometimes it will a little bit, but the best thing, and this was this pastor that was coaching me. My daughter's throwing a fit, and he says, "You need to deal with that, brother." You know? I said, "Oh yeah, she's been going through this." And he said, he whips this out. He's got kids of his own. He whips out this glue stick. He's like, "These are amazing." There's hot glue stick. It's not hot, of course, but he said, you know, you fold it up, you keep it in your pocket or your purse or whatever. It's not loud. If you got to use it in the restroom or whatever, it's just a light, dull thing. But I'm telling you right now, when I'm doing this, that stings. Now, if you wail with this, you will hurt the child. Okay, that's why it's so imperative that you are in control of yourself. When I will go to spank a child, I often will have this, and I will hit myself first to make sure I've got the right level of pain that I want, okay, to inflict. So you first, right? And so even in legal channels, it's about, is it reasonable? And was it only designed to inflict fleeting pain without causing lasting harm to the child? That's what we're going for here. Also, proper posture of correction. Very opinionated on this one, okay? You can do this however you want. But here's what you don't want to do. You don't want to have your belt or your switch or whatever and be chasing them around the house, hitting them with it, okay? And it shouldn't be that they're rolling all over the bed and you're trying to get them or something like that. There is a certain way in which you can handle the child that brings that control and that calm to the situation. All right? I'm going to show you my preferred posture. This is real strange at church, and this is real practical, okay? Cameron, come here. All right. I don't know if you can all see us there, but you're not sitting. I'm sitting. Get up. Okay, I'll sit on the edge of the bed or wherever it might be. I'll sit, and what do? You lean over my knee. Yeah, he's got this down, all right? All right, no, stop kicking. All right, and now his legs will go under this leg. No kicking, no flailing, perfect control. Get down, all right? Seat of correction is in position, all right? And this is the position of control, is what it is, okay? I'm not angry. I'm not wailing on him. We are just it's a position of submission. You get that, right? Okay, it's controlled. And I can gauge his posture from this point of view, okay? Thank you, son. I asked him ahead of time. I said I was going to do this. I said, I don't want to embarrass you, Cameron. If you don't want to do this, we won't. And he's like, I'll help you. So just so you know. All right. So I hope this offers you something, some help. This is just stuff I've worked through myself. Another important point, parents, be united in discipline. There will always be one of you that leans more towards discipline, and there will always be one that leans more towards leniency and mercy, okay? You will disagree on the level of correction. You will disagree when correction is needed. Never disagree in front of your children. Amen? They should never feel that they can run to mom or run to dad whenever correction is going to be needed. When we sense that they are trying to pit us one against another, we have a couple ways of dealing with that. Number one, if they say, I want mommy, I'll say, okay, you're going to get mommy. And mommy will come in and we will administer discipline together. Okay? Either she will hold them in that posture and I will correct, or vice versa, but they know then both of us are united in this. You are wrong, we are right, and we are a team. Okay? Do it together if need be. Also, we don't let them go to the other parent for comfort. If I'm administering correction, they need to hug on me afterwards. They're going to find their comfort from me. So even though I may be the one that leans more towards discipline, I'm not the bad guy. Okay? I don't leave them sitting in the corner, hurting for mom to come and soothe all of their wounds. No. We have worked through this process together, and now they are repentant. Reconciliation is taking place. I'll get to that in just a second. Also, I alluded to this earlier, the parent must win. You must win. They say you have to choose your battles, but I'm telling you, a lot more often, the kids choose it for you. You get to choose the lines on which the battles are fought, but they will choose when the battle begins. And when they engage you in battle, parent, it is imperative that you win, and correction must continue until the child surrenders. And I told you I can gauge their posture. You've seen a child that is rebellious. What are they? They're stiff, right? They're kicking, maybe they're screaming, their backs are stiff. That posture is one where the rebellion is continuing. They are angry, they have not submitted, they are not surrendered. And so it should go to this calmness. All right? From screaming to just a cry, just a sob, where they yield. They yield that anger. And now sometimes they get all worked up, and you got to pause. And you got to take some time. Let's try to calm them down. But if you get to the end of a spanking session and they are still angry at you and they are seething and all this, you're not done. You got to go back and do it again. And that brings me to the last part here. Follow through. When you're done and you've done it right, that child will be eager to wrap their arms around your neck and to find comfort. Don't just leave them uncomforted. If you feel like they need to stew on this for a while, they need to think about what they've done, let them do that before the spanking begins. Send them out earlier. Let them think about it before it comes. And afterward, there should be a time of comfort, a time of forgiveness, time of reconciliation. It is, I'm telling you, from experience, it can be a special, tender time between a parent and a child. Take time to calm them down. Pray with them. Tell them if they need to go apologize to somebody and make it right. Tell them to apologize to God and make it right. When you do it properly, I'm telling you, physical correction will indeed correct their behavior and their attitude. Now, I know this is a long-term thing to correct their direction, but it'll correct some things immediately. It really does. I remember we were at our parents' house, and Raylyn was just in a particular fit that day. And so we went downstairs, and I administered correction. We came back up, and she was just as ornery and angry as ever. And so we went back down. Round two, and I hate that. I hate this. If you're a loving parent, you do this with a tear in your eye. You hate to do this. But the Bible says that whoso spareth the rod hateth his son. Whoso loveth the child chasteneth him betimes. But we went down the second time. And I'm telling you, when that one was done, she came up a different person. And my dad was like, I don't know what you did down there, but that worked. She was radiant. She was happy. She went to playing with her brothers and sisters the way that we wanted her to. We wanted her to be happy, all right? I got to move on. Ephesians 6:4 says, And ye fathers, provoke not your children to wrath, but bring them up in the nurture and admonition of the Lord. This is a tender area where if you don't do it right, you foster wrath in your kids, okay? At a certain point in their age, spanking is just not effective anymore, okay? I'm not saying you don't have the right to do it. You do. If they're a teenager in your home or whatever, you have the right, but it's probably not the wisest way to handle discipline issues. There are other ways to correct a child that is older. If they're being unreasonable, you can ground them, you can remove certain things from their possession, you can reward. I mean, there's so much that you can do with an older child that you don't have to resort to this, except in the most extreme of cases. And if all this sounds like it takes quite a bit of time and effort, like, man, who has time to spank like that? That'd take 30 minutes. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. To do it right, it's a process. It's not easy, it's not fun, it's not quick, but it is biblical, it is essential. And I'll say this, if you're spanking a lot, probably you've bypassed some training that should have taken place. Okay, if you've taught and trained, the spanking should be minimal. It should be rare enough to where it's a big deal every time that it happens. Now, I know, I've been there. Sometimes it's multiple times a day. Sometimes it's one storm after another. But over time, as you're teaching and training and correcting, you're guiding those arrows so that it ought to get, over a course of time, it ought to get more and more rare. And here's the most important point. If you missed everything else, if I've totally turned you off, you're like, that guy's a psycho, I ought to turn him in, whatever, I don't care. Here's what I want you to get. All of this must be done in an atmosphere of love. Okay? Strictness will not drive children to wrath. A lack of love will. It will. You don't have to have the same lines I have. You don't have to be as strict as I am or as lenient as I am. The balance is not as important as the fact that you love the child enough to do it, that you are purposeful, and that you are consistent. You can be way more lenient than me, but if you have drawn some lines in the sand and you consistently follow through with those, you'll have good success. Okay, we don't all have to be identical in our homes on how this all plays out and what it looks like. But you must be purposeful, you must be consistent, you must love them. Why do we have to do that? Because that's how God deals with us. When God gets angry with us, and He does get angry at our sin, adults, right? He gets angry. And as a loving Father, He chastens. He does. He whips on us sometimes, and He allows things to come into our lives that makes you sit up and pay attention. But you know what He does immediately after? Wraps His arms around you, loves you, comforts you. I understand this isn't where society is, okay, and some of it might have really rubbed you wrong, and I don't desire that. I'm not out to make enemies here this morning with some of this. I told you real loud and clear, some of this is my opinion. But the principles behind this are biblical, and they are right. And if you truly love your child, you will teach them, you will train them, and you will correct them. They are arrows in our hands, and one of these days, very soon, sooner than I'd like to say, they're going to fly. They're going to fly away. And largely due to the track we've set them on and how we have aimed them, hopefully, by the grace of God, they hit the target. And they grow up to be adults that love God and serve God and are obedient to Him and can go on for the rest of their lives. Parenting by design. It's a tall order. We all fall short. But at least we got something to look to now. Right? Here's the standard. Let's pray. Father,